Good day, everyone. I am Mr. Julemi Alcasoda, and I was assigned to discuss to you about Philippine literature. So, the literature of the Philippines is predominantly a reflection of the influence of the Spaniards on the indigenous culture and traditions. So, why we need to study Philippine literature? We study literature so that we can be better appreciate our literary heritage. We cannot appreciate something that we do not understand, right? Through the study of our literature, we can trace the rich heritage of ideas and handed down to us from our forefathers. Through such study, we will realize our literary limitations conditioned by certain historical factors, and we can take steps to overcome them. Above all, as Filipinos who truly love and take pride in our own culture, we have to manifest our deep concern for our own literature, and this we can do by studying the literature of our country. Now we move to the period of pre-Spanish. Long before the Spaniards and other foreigners landed on the Philippines shores, our forefathers already had their own literature and stamped in the history of our race. Our ancient literature shows our customs and traditions in everyday life as traced in our folk and stories, old plays and short stories. Whatever records our ancestors left were either borne by the Spanish friars in the belief that they were works of the devil, or were written on that easily perished, like the barks of the trees, dried leaves, and bamboo cylinders, which could not have remained undestroyed even if efforts were made to preserve them. The Spaniards who came to the Philippines tried to prove that our ancestors were really fond of the poetry, songs, stories, riddles, and proverbs, which we still enjoy today, which serve to show to generations the true culture of our people. The pre-Spanish literature is characterized by the following: legends, folktales, epics, folk songs, epigrams, riddles, chants, proverbs, and sayings. Legends are form of prose, the common theme of which is about the origin of a thing, place, location, or name. An example for this is the legend of Tagalogs. Folk tales are made up of stories about life, adventure, love, horror, and humor, where one can derive lessons about life. Example of this is The Moon and the Sun, Tinggian folktale. Epics are long narrative poems in which a series of heroic achievements or events, usually of a hero, are dealt with at length. Other examples of epics: Bidasari, Biag Nilamang, Maragtas, Haraya, Lagda, Hari sa Bukid, Kumintang, Parang Saber, Dagoy at Sudsud, Tutuwang, Indarapatra at Sulaiman, Bantugan, and Daramuki Ababay. Folk songs are one of the oldest forms of Philippine literature that emerged in the pre-Spanish period. These songs mirrored the early forms of culture. Many of these have 12 syllables. Takundiman, this is the awit ng pag-ibig or song of love. Other examples are Kumintang o Tagumpay, Ang Dalit o Imno, Ang Uyayi o Hele, Diana, Suliraning, at Talindaw. The other forms of pre-Spanish poetry consist of epigrams, riddles, maxims, proverbs, much of which came from Tagalog. Some consist of stanzas of wit and wisdom. Epigrams, to others, these are like allegories of parables that impart lessons for the young. Example, aanhin pa ang damo kung patay na ang kabayo. Interpretation, sometimes what comes is too late to be useful. Riddles, these are made up of one or more measured lines, rhymed, and may consist of 12 syllables. Example, Bungbong kung liwanag, kung gabi ay dagat. The answer is math. chant, or bulong, used in witchcraft or enhancement. Example, ikaw ang nagnakaw ng bigas ko, lumuwas sana ang mga mata mo, mamaga sana ang katawan mo, patayin ka ng mga anito. Maxims. Some are rhyming couplets with verses of 5 to 6 or 8 syllables, each line having the same number of syllables. Examples, pag hindi ukol, hindi bubukol. And sa marunong umanawa, sukat ang ilang salita. Sayings, often used in teasing or to comment on a person's actuations. Example, putak-putak, batang duwag, matapang kat nasa pugad. Sawikain, sawikain or sayings with no hidden meanings. Example, nasa Diyos ang awa, nasa tao ang gawa. Now we moved on to the Spanish period in the years 1565-1898. Spanish colonization of the Philippines started in 1565 during the time of Miguel Lopez de Legazpi, the first Spanish governor-general in the Philippines. This part continued unabated until the Cavite Revolt in 1872. The Spaniards colonized the Philippines for more than 3 centuries. During these times, many embraced the Catholic religion, changed their names, and were baptized. They built houses made of stones and bricks, used beautiful furniture like the piano, and used kitchen utensils. Carriages, trains, and boats were used as means of travel. They held fiestas to honor the saints, the Pope, and the governors. They had cockfights or horse races, and the theater as means of recreation. This gave rise to the formation of the different classes of society, like the rich and the landlords. Some Filipinos finished courses like medicine, law, agriculture, and teaching in the Philippines. And we move on to their literary compositions. First, Arte y Reglas de la Lengua Tagalog, or the art and rules of the Tagalog language. This is written by Father Blancas de San Jose and translated to Tagalog by Tomas Pinpin in 1610. Second, Compendio de la Lengua Tagala, or Understanding the Tagalog Language. This is written by Father Gaspar de San Agustin in 1703. Then, Vocabulario de la Lengua Tigala, or Tagalog Vocabulary, the first Tagalog dictionary written by Father Pedro de San Buenaventura in 1613. Next, Vocabulario de la Lengua Pampanga, or Pampango Vocabulary. This is the first book in Pampango, written by Father Diego in 1732. Fifth, Vocabulary de la Lengua Bisaya, Visayan Vocabulary. This is the best language book in the Visayan by Mateo Sanchez in 1711. Sixth is the Arte de la Lingua Ilocana, the art of Ilocano language. This is the first Ilocano grammar book by Francisco Lopez. Seventh, or the last literary compositions, is Arte de la Lengua Bicolana, the art of Bicol language. This is the first book in the Bicol language and written by Father Marcos Lisbon in 1754. Spanish influences in the Philippine literature. The first Filipino alphabet, called Alibata, was replaced by the Roman alphabet. The teaching of the Christian doctrine became the basis of religious practice. The Spanish language, which became the literary language during this time, lent many of its words to our language. European legends and traditions brought here became assimilated in our songs, corridos, and murmuros. Ancient literature was collected and translated to Tagalog and other dialects. Many grammar books were printed in Filipino, like Tagalog, Ilocano, and Visayan. Our periodicals during these times gained a religious tone. Now, these are the first books during this period. Ang Doctrina Christiana, the Christian Doctrine. This was the first book printed in the Philippines in 1593 in xylography. It was written by Father Juan de Plasencia and Father Domingo Nieva in Tagalog and Spanish. Next, Nuestra Señora del Rosario. This is the second book printed in the Philippines. Was written by Father Blancas de San Jose in 1602 and printed at the UST Printing Press with the help of Juan de Vera, a Chinese mestizo. Third is the Libro de los Cuatro Postprimeras de Hombre in Spanish and Tagalog. This is the first book printed in typography. Fourth, Ang Barlaan at Josephat. This is a biblical story printed in the Philippines and translated to Tagalog from Greek by Father Antonio de Borja. It is believed to be the first Tagalog novel published in the Philippines, even if it is only a translation. Fifth is The Passion. This is a book about the life and sufferings of Jesus Christ. It is read only during Lent. There were 4 versions of this in Tagalog, and each version is according to the name of the writer. Orbuna at Felesa, a book by Modesto de Castro, the so-called father of classic prose in the Tagalog. These are letters between 2 sisters, Orbuna at Felesa, and has influenced greatly the behavior of people in society because the letters dealt with good behavior. Ang mga dalit kay Maria, Psalms for Mary, a collection of songs praising the Virgin Mary by Father Mariano Sevilla, a Filipino priest who wrote this in 1865, and it was popular especially during the Maytime Flores de Mayo festival. And then folk songs. Folk songs become widespread in the Philippines. Each region had its national songs, from the lowlands to the mountains of Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. Examples are Leron Leron Sinta, Pamulinawin, Dandan Sui, Sarong Banggi, Atin Ko Pong Sing Sing. Then recreational plays. So there were many recreational plays performed by Filipinos during the Spanish times. Almost all of them were in poetic form. Examples: Tibag, Lagaylay, Panunuluyan, Dasalubong, Panubong, Dabalagtasan, Nadungaw, Carillo, or what we called shadow play, Zarzuela, Sainete, Damurumuro, Karagatan, Duplo, and the Awit, and the Corrido. Now we move on to the period of Enlightenment in the year 1872 to 1898. So after 300 years of positivity under Spanish rule, the Filipino spirit reawakened when the 3 priests Gomez, Burgos, and Zamora were guillotined without sufficient evidence of guilt. The propaganda movement is in the year 1872 to 1896. This movement was spearheaded mostly by the intellectual middle class like Jose Rizal, Marcelo H. del Pilar, Graciano Lopez Haina, Antonio Luna, Mariano Ponce, Jose Maria Panganiban, and Pedro Paterno. The objectives of these movements are to get equal treatment for the Filipinos and the Spaniards under the law, to make the Philippines a colony of Spain, to restore Filipino representations in Spanish courts, to Philippinize the parishes, to give the Filipinos freedom of speech, of the press, assembly, and for redress of grievances. And now let's move on to the highlights of the propaganda movement. So there were 3 principal leaders of the propaganda movement. They were Jose P. Rizal, Marcelo H. Del Pilar, and Graciano Lopez Haina. Dr. Jose Rizal Mercado Alonso y Riolonda was born on June 19, 1861 at Calamba, Laguna. His first teacher was his mother, Teodora Alonso. He studied at the Ateneo de Manila, started medicine at UST, and finished at the Universidad Central Madrid. He also studied at the University of Berlin, Leipzig, and Heidelberg, where he died by musketry in the hands of the Spaniards on December 30, 1896, on charges of sedition and rebellion against the Spaniards. His pen name was Laong Laan and Dimasalang. His books and writings: first, we have the Noli Me Tangere. This was the novel that gave spirit to the propaganda movement and paved the way to the revolution against Spain. In these books, he courageously exposed the evils in the Spanish-run government in the Philippines. The Spaniards prohibited the reading of this novel, but a lot of translations were able to enter stealthily in the country, even if it means to death to those caught in possession of them. For Danuli gave Philippine literature the immortal characters of Maria Clara, Juan Crisostomo Ibarra, Elias, Cesa, Pilusupong Tasio, Doña Victoriana or Doña Victorina, Capitana, Maria Basilio, and Crispin. Rizal had a powerful pen in the delineation of these characters. Next book or writings is El Filibusterismo. This is a sequel to the Noli. While the Noli exposed the evils in society, the Fili exposed those in the government and in the church. However, the Noli has been dubbed the novel of society, while that of Fili is that of politics. Multimo or Mi Ultimo Adios, My Last Farewell. This was a poem by Rizal while he was incarcerated at Fort Santiago, and is one that can compare favorably with the best in the world. It was only after his death when his name was affixed to the poem. Sobre la indolencia de los Filipinos, on the indolence of the Filipinos. This is an essay on the so-called Filipino indolence and an evaluation of the reason for such allegations. Filipinas dentro de 100 años, or the Philippines within a century. This is an essay predicting the increasing influence of the U.S. in the Philippines and the decreasing interest of Europe here. Rizal predicted that if there is any other colonizers in the Philippines in the future, it would be the U.S. Sixth, a la Juventud Filipina, or to the Filipino youth. This is a poem Rizal dedicated to Filipino youth studying at UST. Next is El Consejo de los Dioses, the Council of the Gods. This is an allegorical play manifesting admiration for Cervantes. Next is Junto al Pasig, Beside the Pasig River. This is written by Rizal when he was 14 years of age. Next is Me Pedin Versos, You Ask Me for Verses. This is in 1882, and A las Flores de Heidelberg, To the Flowers of Heidelberg, two poems manifesting Rizal's unusual depth of emotions. Notas a la obra Successus de las Filipinas for el Dr. Antonio de Morga, or Notes on the Philippines Events by Dr. Antonia de Morga. 11th is P. Jacinto Memorias de un Estudiante de Manila. P. Jacinto Memoirs of a Student of Mania in 1882. 12 is the Diario de Viaje de Norte America Diary of Voyage to North America. The next propagandist is Marcelo H. del Pilar. Marcelo H. del Pilar is popularly known for his pen name of Plaridel, Pupdo, Piping Dilat, and Dolores Manapat. He was born at Kupang, San Nicolas, Bulacan on August 30, 1850. His parents were Julian H. del Pilar, noted Filipino writer, and Biasagat Maitan. His brother was the priest Father Toribio del Pilar, who was banished to Marianas in 1872 because there were many children in the family. Marcelo gave up his share of his inheritance for his other brothers and sisters. He died of tuberculosis in Spain, but before he died, he asked his companions to tell his wife and children that he was sorry for he wasn't able to bid them goodbye, to tell others about the fate of our countrymen, and to continue helping the country. Then his writings of then this is the writings of Marcelo H. del Pilar. First, we have the Pag-ibig sa Tinubuang Lupa, or Love of Country. It was translated from the Spanish Amor Patria of Rizal, published on August 20, 1882 in the Diaryong Tagalog. Second, Kaingat Kayo, or Be Careful, a humorous and sarcastic dig in answer to Father Jose Rodriguez in the novel Noli of Rizal. Published in Barcelona in 1888, he used Dolores Manapat as pen name here. Dasalan at Tuksuhan, Prayers and Jokes. This is similar to a catechism but sarcastically done against the parish priest, published in Barcelona in 1888. Because of this, Del Pilar was called a filibuster, done in admirable tone of supplication and excellent use of Tagalog. Fourth is the Ang Kadakilaan ng Diyos, or God's Goodness. It was published in Barcelona. It was also like a catechism sarcastically aimed against the parish priest, but also contains a philosophy of the power and intelligence of God and an appreciation for and love for nature. Then Sagot sa Espanya sa Hibik ng Pilipinas, or the answer to Spain on the plea of the Filipinos. This is a poem pleading for change. This is a poem pleading for change from Spain, but that Spain is already old and weak to grant any aid to the Philippines. This poem is in answer to that of Hermenegildo Flores, Hibik sa Pilipinas, or Hibik sa Pilipinas, a plea from the Philippines. 6 is the Dupluhan, Dalit Mga Bugtong, a poetical contest in narrative sequence, psalms, riddles, a compilation of poems on the oppression by the priest in the Philippines. 7th, the La Soberania in Pilipinas, sovereignty in the Philippines. This shows the injustice of the friars to the Filipinos. 8. Por telefono, by telephone. 9. Pasyong dapat ipag-alab ng puso ng taong babasa. This passion that should arouse the hearts of the readers. Next propagandist is Graciano Lopez Haina, from 1856 to 1896. A most notable hero and genius of the Philippines, Graciano Lopez Haina was born on December 18, 1856 and died on January 20, 1896. He is the pride of Haro Iloilo. He won the admiration of the Spaniards and Europeans. Lopez Haina left the Philippines in 1887 with the help of Don Claudio Lopez, a rich uncle, in order to escape punishment from his enemies, and arrived at Valencia, the center of the Republican movement of the Spaniards. So Graciano Lopez Haina died in Charity Hospital in Barcelona, Spain on January 20, 1896, 11 months before his best friend Rizal was shot at the Luneta on December 30, 1896. Now this is his works, the works of Graciano Lopez Haina. Ang Fray Butod or Friar Butod, one of his works written in Haro, Iloilo in 1876, 6 years after the Cavite Revolt attacking Thai friars in the Philippines. He exposed how some of the friars were greedy, ambitious, and immoral. Second, La Hija, La Hija del Fraile, the child of the friar, and everything is humbug or everything is mere show. Here, Haina explains the tragedy of marrying a Spaniards. Third is Sa Mga Pilipino in 1891. This is a speech which aimed to improve the condition of the Filipinos to become free and progressive. Fourth is Talumpating Pagunita kay Columbus, or an oration to commemorate Columbus, a speech he delivered in Madrid to the 39th anniversary of the discovery of America. Fifth is En Honor del Presidente Moraita de la Asociación Hispano-Filipino 1884. In here, he praised General Moraita for his equal treatment of the Filipinos. Sixth is the In Honor de los Artistas Luna y Resurrección Hidalgo in 1884. This is a sincere expression of praise for the paintings of Hidalgo on the condition of the Filipinos under the Spaniards. Seventh is the Amor a España o a las Jóvenes de Malolos, or love for Spain or to the youth of Malolos. This is the themes is about how girls were taught Spanish in schools and whose teachers were the governors general of the place. 8 is the El Bandolerismo en Pilipinas, Banditry in the Philippines. Banditry in the Philippines. Haina refuted the existence of banditry of the Philippines and how there should be laws on robbery and other reforms. 9th is the Honor in Filipinas, or Honor in the Philippines. The triumphant exposition of La Luna Resurrection and Pardo de Tavera of the thesis that intellect or knowledge gives honor to the Philippines. 10th, Pag-alis sa buwis sa Pilipinas, or the abolition of taxes in the Philippines. 11th, Institution ng Filipinas, or Sufferings of the Philippines. This Haina refers here to the wrong management of education in the Philippines in 1887. And these are the other propagandists. We have Antonio Luna. He was a pharmacist who was banished by the Spaniards to Spain. He joined the propaganda movement and contributed his writings to La Solidaridad, or La Solidaridad. Most of his works dealt with Filipino customs, and others were accusations about how the Spaniards ran the government. His pen name was Tagailog and died at the age of 33 in June 1899. He was put to death by the soldiers of Aguinaldo because of his instant rise to fame, which became a threat to Aguinaldo. Some of his works were Noche Buena, Christmas Eve. It pictured true Filipino life. See the diverting, how they diverted themselves. A dig at a dance of the Spaniards, where the people were very crowded. Third is La Tertula Filipina, a Filipino conference or feast, depicts a Filipino customs which he believed as much better than the Spanish. Fourth, Por Madrid, or For Madrid, a denouncement of Spaniards who claim the Philippines is a colony of Spain, but who think of Filipinos as foreigners when it comes to collecting taxes and stamps. Fifth is the La Casa de Huéspedes, or the landlady house. Depicts a landlady who looks for borders not for money but in order to get a husband for her child. Mariano Ponce. Mariano Ponce became an editor-in-chief, biographer, and researcher of propaganda movement. He used Tikbalang, Kalipulaco, and Naning as pen names. The common themes of his works were the values of education. He also wrote about how the Filipinos were oppressed by the foreigners and of the problems of his countrymen. Among his writings were Mga Alamat ng Bulacan, contains legends and folklores of his native town. Pagpugot kay Longinus or Longinus, the beheading of Longinus, a play shown at the Plaza of Malolos, Bulacan, or a play shown at the Plaza of Malolos, Bulacan. Third, Sobre Filipinos, about the Filipinos and ang mga Pilipino sa Indochina. Then we have Pedro Paterno. Pedro Paterno was a scholar, dramatic researcher, and a novelist of the propaganda movement. He also joined the confraternity of the Masons of the Asociación Hispano-Filipino in order to further the aims of the movement. He was the first Filipino writer who escaped censorship of the press during the last day of the Spanish colonization. The following were a few of his writings. Ninay. This is the first social novel in Spanish by a Filipino. A mi madre, to my mother, shows the importance of a mother, especially in the home. Sampaguita e Poesías Varias Sampaguita and the Varied Poems. This is a collection of his poems. Next, we have Jose Maria or Jose Ma Panganiban. Jose Ma Panganiban hid his identity behind his pen name Jumapa. He was also known for having photographic mind. He was a member of a number of movements for the country. Some of his writings were Ang Lupang Tinubuan or To My Native Land, Ang Aking Buhay, Su Plano de Estudio or Your Study Plan, and fourth is El Pensamiento or The Thinking. The period of active revolution. The Filipinos did not get the reforms demanded by the propagandists. The government turned deaf ears to these petitions. Oppression continued and the government became even more oppressive to the Filipinos. This is the highlights of the active revolution. The noted leaders of this period were Andres Bonifacio, Emilio Jacinto, and Apolinario Mabini. Andres Bonifacio, best known as the father of Filipino democracy, father of the Katipunan, because he led in establishing the Kataas-Taasan, Kagalang-galangang Katipunan ng mga anak na bayan, or KKK. He came from a poor family and it is said that what he learned he got from the school of experience. He was a voracious reader among those he loved to read, which aroused his revolutionary spirit were the Noli and the Fili of Rizal. He joined the La Liga Filipina founded by Rizal in 1892. He established the Katipunan which triggered the spirit of freedom, especially when Rizal was banished to Dapitan, Mindanao. Bonifacio is better known as the great revolutionary rather than a writer, but he also wrote things which paved the way for the revolution and which also became part of our literature. Among his works were Ang Dapat Mabatid ng Mga Tagalog, Katungkulang Gagawin ng Mga Anak ng Bayan, Pag-ibig sa Tinubuang Lupa, The Love of One's Native Land, Huling Paalam. Then we have Emilio Jacinto. Emilio Jacinto was the intelligent assistant of Andres Bonifacio in the establishment of the Katipunan. He is called the brain of the Katipunan. He edited Kalayaan, a Katipunan newspaper, Kartilya ng Katipunan, a primer book on the Katipunan, Liwanag at Dilim, a collection of essays on different subjects like freedom, work, faith, government, love of country. A Me Madre to my mother, a touching ode to his mother. A La Patria, or to my country. This is his masterpiece. Next we have Apolinario Mabini. Apolinario Mabini is known in literature and history as the sublime paralytic and the brains of revolution. He was born in Talaga, Tanawan, Batangas on July 22, 1864. Because he was born of a poor family, he had to work in order to study. He became known to his professors and classmates as at Litran and the UST because of his sharp memory and the simple clothes he used to wear throughout his schooling. He became the right hand of Emilio Aguinaldo when the latter found his republic in Malolos. His contributions to literature were writings in government, society, philosophy, and politics. Here are some of his works. El Verdadero Decálogo, the true Decalogue of Ten Commandments. This was his masterpiece, and his aim here was to propagate the spirit of nationalism. El del Desarrollo e Caída de la República, the rise and fall of the Philippine Republic, sa Bayang Pilipino, to the Filipino nation. Next is Pahayag or News. Then other revolutionists we have Jose Palma. Jose Palma became popular because of his Himno Nacional Filipino, or the Philippine national anthem, which was set to music by Julian Felipe. He was born in Tondo, Manila on June 6, 1876. His brother Rafael Palma became the president of the UP, or University of Philippines. He joined the revolution against the Americans together with Gregorio del Pilar, the youngest Filipino general who died during the revolution. Aside from the national anthem, here are his other works. We have Melancholos or Melancholis, a collection of his poem. Demi Harden in My Garden, a poem expressing one's longings for his sweetheart. Newspapers during the Revolution. First Heraldo de la Revolución, La Independencia, La República Filipina or the Philippine Republic, La Libertad. Then, now we move on to the American regime in 1898 to 1941. Our flag was hoisted on June 12, 1998 as a sign of our independence. General Emilio Aguinaldo was elected as the first president of the Philippine Republic. The Phil-American War resulted in the defeat of General Miguel Malvar. The peace movement started as early as 1900. Filipino writers went into all forms of literature like news, reporting, poetry, stories, essays, plays, and novels. Their writings clearly depicted their love of the country and their longing of the independence. Okay. Literature in the field of newspaper. First is El Nuevo Dia, the New Day. This is established by Sergio Osmeña in 1900. The American censors banned this twice and threatened Osmeña with banishment because of his nationalistic writings. Second, El Grito del Pueblo, the Call of the Nation. This is established by Pascual Poblete in 1900. Third is the El Renacimiento, the Rebirth, founded by Rafael Palma in 1901. There were also plays written then, but after the first and second presentations, the Americans stopped this because of the consistent theme of nationalism. Literature in Spanish. Nuli and Fili was the inspiration of Filipino writers in Spanish. Those who were inspired are Cecilio Apostol, Fernando Maria Guerrero, Jesus Balmore, Manuel Bernabe, and Claro M. Recto. Cecilio Apostol wrote a poem dedicated to Rizal, Jacinto Mabini, and all other heroes, but his poem dedicated to Rizal is considered the best poem in praise of the hero of Bagumbayan. Fernando M. Guerrero, it is believed that he shared with Apostol the reign in the Balagtasan in Spanish during their time. He also dedicated a poem to Rizal, but he collected his best poems in a book called Chrysalidas, meaning a kind of black, woolly caterpillar. Jesus Balmore, well known for his pen name of Batikuling. He and Bernabe participated in a debate on the topic remembrance and forgetfulness. He was elected poet laureate in Spanish, besting Manuel Bernabe, a lyric poet and fierceness of his nationalistic spirit was unchanged in any topic he wrote about. In his debate in Baltimore, he was more attractive to the public because of the melodious words he used. Claro M. Recto, nobility of speech and the theme of his writing, he collected his poems in a book entitled Bajo los Cocoteros, under the coconut trees. Other writers in Spanish we have Adelina Guerrera, Isidro Marpore, Macario Adriatico, Epifanio de los Santos, Pedro Aunario, and Pedro Aunario, which wrote the Decalogo del Proteccionismo. Next, we have Filipino literature. Florante at Laura of Francisco Balagtas and Urbuna at Felisa of Modesto de Castro became the inspiration of the Tagalog writers. Julian Cruz Balmaceda classified three kinds of Tagalog poets. First is the poet of the heart or makata ng puso. Second, poets of life, makata ng buhay, led by Lope K. Santos, Jose Corazon de Jesus, Florentino Colantes, Patricio Mariano, Carlos Gamatmaitan, and Amado V. Hernandez. Third is poets of the stage or makata ng tanghalan. This is led by Aurelio Tolentino, Patricio Mariano, Severino Reyes, and Tomas Remigio. Then we have the other forms of literature. First is we have the Ilocano literature. The writer here is Pedro Bocanig, the father of Ilocano literature. His name derived from the word Bocanigan, which means balagtasan, poetic contest in Ilocano. Second, Claro Caluya is the prince of Ilocano poets, known poets and novelists. Third is Leon Pichay or Leon Pichay, known as Best Bocanegero, a poet, novelist, short story writer, dramatist, and essayist. Next, we have Pampango literature. Juan Crisostomo Soto is the father of Kapampangan literature. The word Crisostan, meaning balagtasan, in Tagalog is taken from his name. Second, we have Aurelio Tolentino. He has a translation of Kahapon, Ngayon at Bukas in Kapampangan, which called Napon Ngene at Bukas. Next, we have Visayan literature. The writers are Heriberto Gumban, father of the Visayan literature. He wrote Zarzuela, Muro-Muro, and a play of Visayan. Magdalena Jolanduli devoted her talent to novel. She wrote Ang Mga Tunok sa Isa Ka Bulaklak. So, this was the end of my topic. So, the second part will be discussed by Miss Israel or Jessa Chris Israel for the continuation. Thank you and God bless.